is 3:08 p.m. Apologies for the delay. We were having some technical difficulties getting Zoom to behave, but it's good to be here. I will begin with the roll call. I'm George Savage. I'm here. Stephen Kasami is absent. He's traveling today. Sends his regrets. Ken Levine. Okay. Lucy Neely also sends her regrets. She has a conflict. Jason Pressman. Michelle Takat. William Urban. Here. Okay, great. So we have 5 of the 7, which is a quorum, which is good. There are no oral communications, from us, but certainly for people, for items not on the agenda. Anyone first on the committee that has something to say before I open it to public comment? Okay. Members of the public, things that are not on the agenda for us to cover. I see Rita has her hand up. Rita, would you like to unmute and comment?
Yes, I just want to say how much I do appreciate some type of audit schedule that is part of the packet. And even though this is something that's on the agenda for today, I want to say that it's been on the agenda and deadlines have been promised in the past. And so all I'd like to say is if any of these dates change, if this document can be made available for people to see that those dates have changed, because a lot of these pieces we were promised dates in the past with no way to contact somebody to ask about if something had already been finished or when will it be updated. So thank you for considering my question.
Okay, Rita. Yeah, absolutely. And I just hope everyone can note that my practice here until we're caught up on audits is the first item on every finance committee new business agenda is going to be our audit status. So we're going to publicly talk about this at every meeting until we put this to rest. So any changes in schedule will be highlighted. And if you have any questions on it, Rita, I would suggest or request that you reach out to me directly and we can sort it out.
I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Anyone else? All right. So that's very quick. Summer holidays may be diminishing the number of questions for the moment, but this is an important meeting. Nevertheless, as we're going through a number of really important items, I don't see any announcements or presentations. We'll move to approval of the minutes. We have 2 sets of minutes to approve at this meeting. Those are the minutes for April 25th and June 9th. We'll begin with the minutes for April 25th. Have the committee members reviewed these, and are there any questions or changes? Okay, and do I hear a move to approve the April 25th agenda meeting minutes? Okay.
Questions from the public, please?
Okay, Rita, yeah, what would you like to say?
Okay, I just don't see the members of the public that were present in these minutes.
Yeah, I would only comment from my perspective that sometimes it's really challenging to record all members of the public, particularly in the era of Zoom where people A, come and go, and B, sometimes are identified by a telephone number or an acronym or initials. So it's challenging to be comprehensive on that, to be quite frank.
I think we should try. Thank you.
Okay, thanks a bunch. I had a motion to approve both sets of minutes. Is there a second? A second. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, they're adopted or approved. That's good. We'll move on to item 5, new business, and we'll begin with the audit status. And for that, I ask Cindy if you can comment on where we are.
Excuse me for interrupting. We're unable to hear you.
We're working on the microphones.
Thank you. I hope everyone can hear me now.
Yes.
Okay, so I just wanted to start off and address, good afternoon again, and address the speakers and the community and start with some really exciting news. We actually went through a recruitment process and have extended an offer out to 2 senior accountants, one who is already on staff with us right now as a temporary employee. So he will be shifting into a term permanent position. It's a 3-year limited term until we decide what the needs are of the department at that time, and then make a determination at that point. The second senior accountant would be a permanent position. That would be the original replacement of the analyst position that we had previously on staff. With these 2 filled positions, we do really feel that this will help facilitate the schedule that we have outlined for our audit, and really brings in that necessary skill set to allow us to stick to the timeline. Additionally, further communication will be provided to Finance Committee as well as Council if anything changes based on our plan that we have outlined.
That's great.
I'm sorry, the new hire starts when?
The temporary position that we have right now will be effective August 1st, so just within a couple days. And then the second senior accountant will be in just a couple of weeks, mid-August, about August 15th is what we're projecting.
But the temp is here.
The temp is already here, yes, but he will be shifting into a permanent position.
Got it. Well, that's very good news. That helps address what I believe has been the biggest stumbling block we've had, have been qualified people to actually do the work.
Exactly.
Okay.
Thank you.
If you could take us through perhaps the audit schedule that you provided and just walk the committee here through that.
Sure. So for the item that's included in the packet with the timeline, we have the first portion of the audit schedule with providing the state controller's report for fiscal year 21-22. We intend to have all of the documentation needed to our auditors, Mays and Associates, by around mid-August. And then once they have all of our items necessary, they will prepare the reports and provide those to the state controller. And then this, just to highlight that this report will be the unaudited numbers. So these will be the unaudited numbers so that we are in compliance with the state requirements. The next section of our main focus will be the completion of fiscal year 2020-2021 audit, and that we do intend to complete all of the reconciliation necessary, further complete data integration with some of the new systems that we have, and then provide all of that documentation to our auditors with the intention to have a complete audit to present to council by early 2024 in January.
Okay.
Next steps in continuation with that is continued work on fiscal year 2021-2022. Additionally, the same process, complete all of the documentation, provide all of the necessary details to our auditors with the planned dates of presenting to council in May of 2024. And additionally, for fiscal year 2022, 2023, similar process, compiling all of the necessary documentation, providing to the auditors with final presentation to council in July of 2024.
Okay, very good. And you feel as of right now that you have the resources in the department with these two new hires to adhere to this schedule going forward?
Yes, yes. And we've already begun the work with the temp position that we have on staff.
I'd like to open the audit schedule and the audit status to discussion for the committee. Any questions or comments?
I have two. One, I'd like to say that it's nice to see that the time of the audit, the duration of the audit is decreasing from 2 months.
Yes. Yes.
So hopefully, people who are
We can't hear, sorry.
so commenting that the duration of the audit go from 3 months to 2 months to 1 month over the 3-year period, was it the 3 years that we're auditing, and I was glad to see that. Second question is that back at the April meeting, I recommended that we audit 2 years, a 24-month period, so we can catch up more quickly. And we're going to look at that and talk to the Mays Associates. What was the outcome of that?
We did bring this up to Grace Zhang with Mays and Associates. Although she believes that it would be great to go through and complete the audits as quickly as possible, it would be most effective to take year by year and move, with 1 year, complete that year and then move forward and go through that process.
Okay, and did we discuss that with her as to why she felt that? Or
There wasn't any further communication. I believe that there is also on their end, they also have staffing issues, and they really just wanted to make sure we focus on the task at hand and really just focus on 1 year at a time.
okay.
Other comments or discussion in the committee? How about online? I see some hands. Betsy, why don't we start with you?
Hey, thank you very much, George and committee, for your diligence and work here. And Cindy, thank you for your report and the schedule. It's useful. I read through the minutes for April 25th, though, and I did have a question on the first page under new business item B, discuss audit status for fiscal year 2021. Cindy, you said that at that point, a couple lines down, that the 2021 audit is in compliance and unaudited numbers have been submitted to the state controller's office. So having read that and then later on discovered your report, I couldn't reconcile that with completing the preparatory work for that in July, when I thought you turned it in by April 25th. And moreover, under the audit, it says complete reconciling work for the 2021 year on September 15th. So those three things together, I need help unpacking what means what.
Sure, and I can provide further clarification. So there are multiple reports that are submitted to the state controller. We have a series of reports for all of our maintenance districts. So those were the reports that were already submitted and are in compliance as far as unaudited numbers. This report that we are completing is for the overall town-wide unaudited numbers.
So when you said that the 2021 audit is in compliance and has been submitted to the state, you were meaning not the audit, but a subset of that?
Yes.
Oh, well, in the future then, I think clarity, because right now our faith is kind of rocked. And clarity and precision in communication in financial matters is very valuable.
Yes, understood.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Next, we'll move to Caroline.
Great, thank you very much. Yes, to the committee, thank you for all your work, and thank you for Cindy for this report. Betsy, that was a great question. I wanted to check again if the ARPA funds and all the financials related to ARPA, is that part of this audit or is that a separate audit? Thank you.
That is a separate audit. That report is in compliance and was submitted in April. It was due to the state or to the federal government at the end of April, and that was submitted.
Thank you.
Great, and we'll head back to Rita.
Thank you. One of my questions is, here it is, these reports are a couple of years old, and I'd like to know what the state is responses in our, doing these files a couple of years late. And now after someone else's question, it seems that there's only parts of it that have gone in. And these are the numbers from 2021. And in past meetings, it was like these were going to be ready. And I know that there was, money because of COVID, which makes each year quite unique. And most companies would not do, even if they were doing multiple years, which is not usually suggested, would not have done multiple year audits just because of those COVID monies and having to do all the extra work, having to do it. And so I guess one of the things I'd like to ask on the schedule is, since it is, so behind, have we met the date, the first date on here of July 17th, 2023, which was last week? Is that part completed? Thank you.
Yes. So our auditors have our numbers as of last week.
And just to elaborate on, I think what Rita was getting at as well, is it accurate to say that we've submitted unaudited numbers on schedule to the state throughout?
So the numbers to the state were based on the schedule is August 18th. So the numbers have been provided to our auditors.
Yeah. I mean, previously over the last several years, I think there's some concern that from Rita, and Rita, correct me if I'm misstating your position. How is the state reacting to our audits being so late? Is it accurate? Perhaps you can just comment on that.
Yeah, that's accurate. And our previous town manager had stated that the numbers that he was sending to the state were unaudited and were projected. So I've had a concern for several years on the status of what they think about us. Thank you.
So we've been working really closely with the state controller's office. We've been communicating with them. We've provided additional information and communication as to the current situation, our staffing situation, and a number of other issues that the town has been dealing with. So we have direct communication with the state controller, and they are fully aware of our situation in the backlog.
Great, and it's fair to say that they haven't expressed adverse opinions about
No.
the state of it. Okay. Very good. Any more comments from the public on the audit item? Seeing none, I just want to congratulate the team here on getting the resources in place and having a schedule. And as we've discussed previously, this will remain a perennial topic here at the committee until everyone's up to date. You can see there's a great deal of public interest in it all, and the best way to deal with it is to just highlight what's going on. If we hit any snags, we should highlight them. We would approach any of those kind of delays here in a problem-solving mode with everyone here to try to figure out what we can do to help us get caught up, as this plan shows us doing, and then hopefully take what we've learned on how to do that to be exemplary and efficient, quick audits in the out years. With that, is there any more comment?
Yes, can I direct a question to committee members? Back from the April minutes, we had a discussion about whether we were going to have an audit subcommittee and said in there that we were going to table that to a future meeting. Then I noted, I was taking minutes on June 9th. I don't think we talked about that in the last meeting. So we kicked that can down the road. Is this something we can discuss now to finalize what we plan to do there?
I think we certainly can. Yeah, audit status is a perennial topic. I don't see a need for a separate subcommittee. Given this is going to be the first order of business for this committee at every meeting right now. But I'm happy to hear from people who have a different view. Okay, so we'll not proceed with an audit subcommittee at this time. However, as previously stated, this will become the perennial, opener here for this meeting. And hopefully we'll just be able to report on steady progress going forward. But again, if we hit problems, which happen in life, we'll deal with them. Okay. Thank you for that, Bill. Moving on to item number B.
May I ask one parting question, George?
Sure, why not?
Thank you so much. I apologize for being out of order. I was wondering if, since we have a relationship now with the state, just explicitly, I'd like to know, have we encountered any fines as of yet?
No, we have not.
Thank you, Cindy. Appreciate it.
Okay, very good. We'll close out on the audit thing. Now we're going to item B, revisions to the fiscal year 2023-24 budget as adopted. I understand that some changes were made from the budget that we all saw at the last meeting. And Cindy, back to you to tell us about this.
Thank you. I have just a couple of, I'll have some visuals to share.
Oh, good.
Some technical difficulties. 1 second. I'm not sure it's actually-
Here we go.
There we go. Oh. If you look at the screen, we have here a list of items that were revised from the initial presentation that we provided here to Finance Committee. These were the additional revisions that resulted from the first Finance Committee from the first council town council meeting in June. Apologies. So based on the initial review, we had additional direction from council to make further revisions on the budget to reduce the overall requirement from our reserves, which was projected at first originally about a $1.6 million requirement of reserves. The following changes were taken on the budget. With the first change, we increased the projected UUT revenue. Our first analysis and look at the revenue that we had budgeted seemed understated. So we did increase the UUT revenue by 150,000 to more accurately reflect the 1% increase in general fund revenue. And this was essentially based on the discounted rate, that 1% increase that would be effective July 1st. The next change was reducing the town attorney expenditure line item, originally budgeted at 300,000, which was then reduced to 180,000. We also eliminated the general fund expenditure, the requirement for open space maintenance. There was further discussion at the council meeting to eliminate that as a general fund requirement, and for temporarily for this budget year, it was reduced to be equivalent to the revenue, 10% of the open space revenue generated from UUT. So it would be just 10% of that cost. So the total reduction went from 94,000, which was originally proposed, to 44,000, and it would be funded by open space temporarily until a policy is determined for ongoing maintenance. And that discussion would be continuing between Conservation Committee, Open Space Committee, and Council.
Question. On the previous line, how are we reducing the?
We had originally projected, because it was quite an increase with the new interim town attorney budget. We did intend that expect that the housing element wouldn't take as much requirement as far as the interim town attorney's time. And then that's where we based the reduction from 300. Originally, year over year, it's been at about 140,000 every year. So the original increase to 300,000 was based on their new rate, but we don't anticipate as much time being spent on the housing element. Yes, but definitely, yes, we will be monitoring this item to determine if there will be a need to increase that budget line item in the future. Additionally, a reduction by 25% on the fuel mitigation program. The original budgeted item was 303,000. It was now reduced to 227,250. This would be based on the work being performed by the fuel mitigation program. This one would also be monitored. We have additional budget items for Flame Mapper and as well as a grant writer, which a grant writer, we do expect that if we do acquire some grants, it could also offset some of that cost and help to continue on the work performed for the program. We did move forward with freezing one vacant position. We originally had two positions open for the maintenance worker position. So we did freeze one of those, which created a reduction to the general fund by 77,000, which includes the staff salary and benefits costs. Additionally, we incorporated an additional 3 months of the sheriff's contract extension for an additional discount of 213,000 on the extension for the contract. Negotiations are continuing with the sheriff's department for the final agreement for fiscal year 2023-24.
The last meeting we talked about figuring out
There will be continued discussion on the sheriff's contract, and I believe at the next meeting. Howard, if you want to maybe add something additional.
We just finished the extension. So we're going to be going into discussions with the sheriff a little more in detail. So we have set up as placeholders meetings on the council agenda for September. So more to come on that, but it will be featured at the council agenda. I'd keep an eye on that on the further discussions. Thank you.
Thank you, Howard. There was additionally an oversight on the initial budget presentation for general fund requirement to support our gas tax fund. We had an additional line of $80,000 for a capital improvement project that was already completed in fiscal year 22-23. So by reducing that expenditure, it no longer requires that additional support from general fund. So that was also a reduction of 80,000. Along with the capital improvement project, we also had an additional project of renovating the playground walkway of $20,000. The item was also included in the fiscal year 2022-23 budget, and that was actually just completed in June. So there was no longer a need to rebudget that for fiscal year 23-24.
And that was 20,000?
Yes. Additionally, we also had a reduction of from 60,000 to 20,000 for our expenditure line item in landscape supplies and services. Really just looking at our overall actuals in the prior fiscal years and looking at that level of service. So we did determine that we can reduce that line item as well. Additionally, resulting from the June 27th special town council meeting, council also provided an additional direction to reduce a line item for the housing element post-adoption plan by 25,000.
And what was that reduction again for the housing element?
It was the post-adoption plan.
Okay.
So with those changes, just wanted to also provide an update on the fund balance and reserves. As you may be aware, the town's policy is to maintain a minimum of 60% of annual budgeted operating expenditures with the general fund's unrestricted fund balance. The initial proposed budget reviewed was just under 49% of the annual budgeted operating expenditures. Therefore not meeting the adopted policy of maintaining a minimum threshold of 60%. Apologies. Overall, the initial proposed general fund budget was reduced, reducing the requirement of about almost 1.6 drawn reserves to 868,000, which was more in line of the budget, the deficit budget that was presented for 2022-23.
So we saved about $900,000.
Correct. Additionally, with the changes based on council direction and additional staff review, we will continue conversations with council and hold budget workshops and study sessions as well as we bring forward a revised budget, mid-year budget revision in early 2024. To also bring forward and have additional discussions moving forward with including revenue enhancement as well.
Did we incorporate any additional interest based on cash held by the town?
We did not incorporate any additional revenue based on interest, no.
If I could follow up on that, is that because we're not going to do enhanced cash management, or you just don't know what number to put on
Yes, at the time, we don't necessarily have a number allocated to include in the budget, but we also feel like that would be an additional topic of discussion through our workshops and study sessions.
And the two capital expenditures. What was the thinking at the time you put together the first estimate? And they were actually completed in the month before.
They're actually built into, so one of them particularly, the one that's tied to gas tax, that one was actually kind of folded into our annual street resurfacing project. So it was a little hidden until further review. Then that's when it was determined that that was an additional item that should not be included with the total budget for the street resurfacing project. The walkway, well, partially, yes. We just didn't expect to have that project completed before the end of the fiscal year. And we did. Thanks to Howard and his team. If there, at this time, if there's any questions or comments related to budget changes, I'd like to open that up.
Yeah, okay. I'll reserve comments about cash management and such because we have another later agenda item on that. That will be the final item today. Well, actually, and the third item as well. So I don't want to get ahead of myself, but questions about the budget, I guess. Anyone here on the committee? What about moving to members of the public then? And could we turn off the screen share so I can see people's hands?
Yes.
I see Rita. Rita, would you like to comment, please?
Thank you. As you can tell, this particular topic is near and dear to my heart. You know, you mentioned that the $25,000 was taken off of the post-adoption plan for the housing element. You know, $25,000 after some of these discussions of what's been spent already. Now, was that something that is critical? Was that something that we didn't need? I know you're going to talk soon about that interest on the cash in that one of the members spoke about at the last meeting or the meeting before. It was an incredible presentation of how we were missing out on over $400,000 a year in interest. And so I'd like to know, what was that item that was taken away that was $25,000 in case it was something that for the community, it's nice to balance the budget, but if it's something that was critical for the community to do the post-adoption plan, we'd like to know. Thank you.
And Judith Haskell is here, so I think she's going to comment. Is that, can you hear Judith as she's talking?
I don't hear anyone talking except for you, George.
How about now? Does that do anything?
Yes,
Okay.
yes,
Brilliant.
thank you.
Okay. Thanks for the question, Rita. Craig Taylor and I had agreed that the amount by which the post-adoption plan budget would be reduced was workable. And that was after we did diligence. The line item that affected was coming up with local CEQA thresholds. And when we dug into what that work entailed, because what we have in mind is to look at what other jurisdictions do and use that as a starting point, we realized that the level of work entailed had been overestimated. So that is something we went back, looked at the amount of work entailed, and decided that we had basically doubled the necessary budget. So we are thinking this is not something critical that you will be missing. It's just more realistic based on talking with the interim town attorney and others more familiar with that process than Craig and myself.
Thank you.
And for members of the public, I had a little sidebar there. As chairman, I forgot to assign anyone the role of secretary for this meeting. And since I appear to be the only one writing things down, I'm now assigning that homework to myself, which will encourage me to remember better in the future. I'll have to apologize in advance to members of the public if I don't have not accurately recorded every comment, because I just assumed that someone else would do it without actually gaining agreement on that. So, all right, with that.
It's being, talking out of line, but it is being recorded.
Yes, okay, that's good. That's good. But I hate having to watch videos in real time too. That's just a personal thing. Okay. Other comments from the public on this item? I don't see any hands. So we're gonna, these are all related items. So we're gonna move on to item C, which is to discuss our town cash investment policy, which was attached here. And this, I think, is going to be potentially a discussion that could have a material no tax increase or new tax required effect on our remaining structural budget deficit. How should we approach this? You've attached the existing policy. Do you want to comment on that first, and then we can have a discussion about cash management?
Yes, and Starla will open that up.
Okay.
So I hope that you all received a copy of the town's investment policy this afternoon. I'm sorry I went out to you so late, but I think that it really sets the guardrails, if you will, of what we are allowed to invest in and what we're not allowed to invest in. So with that, I think we can turn it over to everyone to have this discussion, but I just want to make sure that these restrictions are not town restrictions by and large. I mean, some are nuanced, but they are largely California state regulations that we must comply with. I like to tell people 85 to 90% of what we do as staff is regulated by the state of California, with nuances by individual town policies. So we truly answer to a higher authority. So with that, I'll see what direction and discretion you guys have in mind.
Okay, well, great. I'll just comment initially here that I think all of these standards of care that the state has set and the town has adopted make a lot of sense in terms of the most important thing we can do, since we're holders of taxpayers' money that belongs to everyone here in town collectively for our collective use. Safety, liquidity are the first two priorities, and the list of permitted investments reflects that. And then return or yield is number 3. And what I think we're going to focus on here, and I'd like to ask Bill as the most knowledgeable here to comment on the opportunity we're letting stay aside, is that there are ways to ensure 1 and 2 in the current environment while substantially improving on number 3 at the same time. And that in many situations, inertia is sort of our big enemy, and that financial institutions can profit from people just having their money sit there and not really pay attention to it and move it into a higher yielding but equally safe asset. And if anything I've said is incorrect, Bill, please correct me, but maybe you can comment on where we are with cash management, where we might be.
So to be specific, what we're talking about is the Town of Portola Valley Investment Policy 3.0 under objectives, 3 listed, 3.1 safety. So the current allocation among the LAIF and the various bank accounts is safe from the perspective that there's very low probability of losing any of that money. Now, we've all noticed in the last 3 to 4 months that if you have a deposit in a bank account, or I think it's true also for the credit union, there's FDIC insurance up to $250,000. Anything above that is not explicitly insured, although we know that what happened in the previous case, the government essentially said they would cover that. So the alternative we've been researching, money market funds, have the same measure of safety in terms of there's a low probability of loss because the holdings, what really matters in a money market fund is what are the underlying holdings? And the underlying holdings in most money market funds, at least the ones we consider, are the same type of holdings that represent bank holdings and represent the holdings in the LAIF. And so the LAIF holds federal bonds, repurchase agreements, the same things are in a money market fund. So a money market fund, which is what we've been looking to analyze, is not a different vehicle. It's simply different packaging of the same underlying holdings. And it's the underlying holdings that determine what the safety of an investment are. Point number two, 3.2 liquidity. Money market funds are fully liquid any trading day. They're as liquid as bank deposits in some case, and maybe more liquid than bank deposits. Some bank deposits have holding periods and minimums and things like that that I believe are subjected to. Money market funds sometimes have the same thing in terms of minimums, but they're daily liquidity. And the holdings are very short average maturity, so they don't fluctuate much in value. The third point on total return is what we're going after. That's where we're trying to find enhancement, at least enhancement based on current yields that are available to us in the marketplace compared to what we currently have. So I see no degradation in our opportunity to meet any of those three objectives with what we're discussing and proposing, and at least for some period of time, a fairly significant enhancement in 3.4, the total return.
Great. And would it be fair to say that what we are proposing as a finance committee is that we move our assets into money market funds that have underlying assets that consist of the allowed investments, authorized investments here under section 6.1?
Yes, that's what we're looking at and what we proposed. And to help with that, staying with the investment policy, we have to move to section 6.0, where there's a listing of what the authorized investments are. We have to be compliant with that. And under 6.1, under investment types, I would direct your attention down. I think it's a third bullet point down. It says that pools and other investment structures incorporating investments permitted in California Government Code section 53601 and 53635, such as local government investment pools sponsored by counties and joint powers authorities. These entities may have their own investment policy that differ from the town. So what's important about that in terms of what we're proposing to look at, that is money market funds. Money market funds, in fact, are a pool of investments. The underlying investments can be treasury bills, federal bonds, agency notes, repurchase agreements, CDs, the same types of things, by the way, that the LAIFs typically invest in, and the one that we use do invest in. So even though I would suggest that even though the listing of authorized investments do not specifically say money market funds are permitted, it does say that pools and other investment structures, of which money market funds is another investment structure, do hold only those investments, at least the ones we're considering, only hold those investments permitted in California Government Code 53601 and 53635. So if you then roll over to California, and I don't know if we want to do that now, but if you roll over to California Government Code, you'll find that the types of listings, you know, it's treasuries, it's repurchase agreements, it's CDs, it's all the same types of things we've been talking about. There's no fundamental difference between the allowable holdings in our pooled LAIF fund and any number of money market funds, other than the relative proportion of those different allowed investments they hold. So that's a judgment they make based on, you know, what their objectives are for their investors. They're not a difference in kind, they're only a difference in proportion. The difference in yield between these various vehicles is dependent on that mix between the different authorized investments. To some extent, it's also based on their scale. The California LAIF, I think, is about 25 or 26 billion of assets. That's pretty small potatoes in the money market world. I mean, many of the money market funds, the big ones, have several hundred billion of assets, and it costs about the same to run 25 billion as it does 200 billion of money. So, when you've got a bigger pool, that allows you to reduce costs quite a bit. Also, many of the best and largest money market funds are run by brokerage firms and mutual fund companies that want to offer very attractive yields and keep their prices or costs very low, because those are feeder sources for their brokerage and their trading platforms and their mutual fund platforms. Those companies are fighting to hold cash of their investors so that it doesn't leave and go to banks or some other place.
Well, I certainly support recommending to the town council that we pursue this. Do you have an estimate of how much revenue may be left on the table currently?
When I did my spreadsheet estimates a couple months ago, it was from it was based off the numbers that Cindy had given me. I think it was based on end of April numbers, and I don't have an update since then. And you have to make an assumption about how much money stays in the low yielding bank accounts in order to handle accounts receivable and payables and those types of things. And my estimate is somewhere between $28,000 and $32,000 per month could be picked up incrementally by moving into one of any number of money market funds, because at that point in time, there was about a little over a 2% differential or spread between what we could get from the 2.8 or 2.9% on the state LAIF and the almost 5% we could get on quite a number of money market funds, including ones that hold nothing but treasury bills. So I did that math, assumed a certain percent of the money would stay within the banks, and came up with that number. Now, one other point to emphasize, because it came to me at our last meeting, our largest cash balances are held in two restricted funds. One which is the Open Space Preserve, and I can't remember the name of the other one right now. It has about, which one I'm talking about, right, Cindy?
Yeah.
So what are the amounts in those two restricted, those two large? About 13 or 14 million of the total is in those two, I believe.
12 to 13, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then you recall we have about another 4.5 million that is invested in the Portola Valley Investment Fund, which is already invested in, quite honestly, more volatile investments than what we're talking about here with cash equivalents. Those are invested in 3 exchange traded funds in various types of bonds, all of which are allowable under the government code. So the amount that's left for enhancement, let's put it this way, a large part of the potential enhancement would not flow through to our general fund. It would flow through to those pools of a restricted fund. So it's still good, it's still worth getting,
right?
But if we're measuring just the upside, we're getting additional revenue to the unrestricted, it's maybe a third of that. So it maybe on the order of 110,000 per year, and over 200,000 what an annual run rate would go into the restricted fund. So it's all good money, but it's not as big a panacea as we might think for whatever the budget shortfall is in the short term.
Sure, but that's very helpful. Would certainly benefit the various specialized funds to avoid inflation eroding the purchasing power of those pools of capital for their intended purposes. And $110,000 a year, that's in the same order of magnitude as our UUT increase coming up, and would probably whittle away 12 or 13% of the remaining structural deficit. So I think it makes sense to pursue this. What do we need to do to recommend this approach?
Well, I guess I would want to know explicitly what the motion is going to be. We have not had an opportunity to have the city or the interim town attorney look at this proposal.
Okay.
And I think we'll need to hear from the town attorney that she thinks that this is.
I'm sorry, I'm having trouble hearing you clearly. So if you could, thank you.
Yeah, I'm sorry. the town attorney has not had the opportunity to review this proposal, so it would be very helpful for us if you had an explicit motion, so we understand what the direction is of the finance committee. And then we'll take back both and give her an opportunity to look at the government codes and look at the proposal and then give her legal opinion on it.
Could you restate that for me? I think it's my hearing, but I couldn't hear clearly.
Yeah, what I think Starla is saying is that she'd like to hear an explicit motion that talks about what we're proposing so that the town attorney can think about it in terms of compliance with all the various statutes, in terms of what we're specifically recommending.
Let me make an alternate suggestion, which I think we've been talking about this for a while now, and it's getting a little bit long in the tooth. Let me propose, if you'll set it up, that either I or another member of this committee if we want to appoint a small subcommittee, maybe this would be a good subcommittee assignment. Meet with legal and take them through this. I think this will work. And the reason I think that is we did exactly the same thing 6 years ago with then legal counsel when we were proposing setting up the Portola Valley Investment Fund. And we took legal counsel through what we were proposing. We stepped through in even more detail than we did here, the investment policy statement, the government code, went through the prospectuses of the funds we were intending to use to show how they complied and so forth. And she at that time then blessed it. And then we came back and said, okay, we're ready to go. So that's part one. Part two is a second piece that I'm hoping staff could do. And if they need, our committee to vote to ask you to do that, I'll propose a motion, which is to tell us how much money over the next 3 to 6 months, for example, how much money needs to be in the various bank accounts we have now in order to satisfy the revenues and disbursements without interfering with that. I'm not asking this, the total amount, because I know the total amount over the 6 months will be a large number, but the point is under this kind of a structure, you're doing some active cash management. You're doing 2 to 3 times a month, maybe you're moving money between, a money market fund back into a bank to handle withdrawals. And there may be, like after property taxes come in, for example, there's a large amount of money coming into and deposited probably in the bank or the LAF that can be moved. So we need to get a sense of, what the movement looks like. That's something, and that could be a separate meeting between maybe myself or another member of this committee and, one of you to kind of, because we want to make sure we've got enough money in the bank accounts to cover what you need, but not having excess amounts. So that's kind of a sit down for an hour and a half and doing some math together to kind of figure that out. And then I think we've got assuming our attorney is on board, then we get her to that point. Then we come back and to this committee and then to the council say, let's go ahead and implement this. Now, another point about this, I'm hoping this becomes an established ingrained part of what staff does. So going into the future, you're not looking to this committee or another committee to do this kind of analysis. This is kind of the front end to get it set up so we have the right kind of vehicles and they're allowable and we kind of know how it works. And then we kind of test drive it to make sure it works smoothly. I don't think it's going to be a lot of work after it's up and running. I'm sure you move probably more stuff around every month than this could possibly represent with all the invoices and so forth you're processing. So it's just like running a big checkbook, frankly. So I think it can be learned fairly quickly, even though it may feel uncomfortable at first because you may not see as much money sitting in a bank account as you're used to seeing, but it's still there. I mean, it's totally liquid. Stuff can be moved over at any time and any trading day. So 24 hours later, you've got cash where you need it. There's no restrictions on that. You just can't do it over a weekend, but banks aren't processing checks over weekends either.
I think there's another alternative that I'd like the committee to think about, and or maybe some kind of marriage of these two alternatives. And that is to get a professional management team to manage the money. Most cities have that. You get standard reporting, like monthly, quarterly, annually, and you would see explicitly what the investments are and what the returns are. And I think that would be a great way to ensure that you're getting adequate information and that the money is being more aggressively managed. And typically the cost of that is the increase in the yield is greater than the costs to manage the money. And I'm not saying they have to be exclusive, but I really think that's a direction we need, that I would recommend to you. I think the problem is, of course, you have to issue an RFP and you have to interview and so there's a process. It's not going to be next Friday, but I think it's still worth pursuing.
With respect, I think you may be enlarging what's required here. We're not talking about developing and monitoring and rebalancing a broadly diversified portfolio of many different types of investments. We're simply talking about adding probably just one other cash alternative to the ones you currently have with the, I think, Bank of America, TechCU, LAIF, just another source of moving money. It doesn't require ongoing analysis of the investments on a monthly basis. What it requires once it's up and running is the ability to do your forecasting for how much money you're going to need on the 30th of each month and how much money is coming in. You're already doing that. And then saying, well, we need 250,000 in this month. We've got 800,000 in, so let's move 550 to the money market fund. And then 15 days later, when we need it more, we can pull it back out. I really don't believe it's any more than that. And I used to be in this business. This is not rocket science. It takes discipline and good record keeping, but I'm sure within this town, we have both of those. And I think we can do this without hiring even an external full-time consultant. You might need a couple hours here and there to get and frankly, I made this offer 2 or 3 months ago to Howard and City. I said, I'll do that for you, at least, and through the part to get the legal approval and all that kind of stuff, and actually help you with the first month or two of doing it. If I'm wrong and it's too immensely complicated or difficult, then I think your suggestion makes sense. But I think we're a long way from needing that. In my judgment, it just is not that. I just don't think it's that complicated.
And what I would recommend from here to help get into the details further, because I think that'll help illuminate your concerns, Starla, as well as what Bill's talking about, is I like the idea of a subcommittee with you on it, Bill, and then whoever else would like to join him, to take this offline, discuss with town staff, with the legal side as well, and then report back to us. And that's how we can get to a specific recommendation, right? Because this requires a large amount of cooperation, coordination in terms of how this would actually work, and specifically what we're talking about and making sure it's compliant with all the rules. I'd like to open it up to everyone else to comment on that as an idea, and anything else you care to address.
No, I agree with you, Bill. Just a question. Could this replace the LAIF? I mean, why isn't it like the equivalent but higher yielding, or no?
So if the question is, so we currently, how much do we have in the LAF right now? Do you know, Cindy?
Roughly about 12 million.
Yeah, and that's earning about 2.8 to 2.9% per year, which is about 2% below what we're talking about. So yeah, it could. I mean, there's no requirement to use the LAIF. It's often used because it's convenient, and most municipalities don't have people like us who are trying to.
Well, to
have
me,
these
it's the same
questions
thing,
put
right?
on
It's
it.
just another. So I mean, are we moving money back and forth to the LAIF now, or is it
Not regularly, no.
so like once a year or twice a year?
Yes.
Yeah, so it's used currently now mainly as a sort of a long-term parking place, but If we're
Yeah,
gonna have a
you
long-term
wanted
parking
more.
place, we'd like to get 5%, not 3%.
Yeah, I think one of the things Bill is pointing out is the frequency with which you have to move money around depends. It's a choice that you make. You could always leave plenty of buffer cash in your low yielding bank account to avoid the extra management intensity of moving it around all the time. And companies make those kind of determinations. Typically, a company of any particular size has a treasury function, and they don't want to leave a lot of money on the table. And so they're going to be transferring things every month anyway. So they just do that with minimal buffer. If on the other hand, you don't have all that much extra staff time, you can make it so we do this quarterly or whatever makes sense for your workload.
And Michelle, back to your point, I remember, 6 months ago or 6 years ago, when we were doing the initial about the Coal Valley Investment Fund. I remember talking with Cindy, and it actually takes quite a bit of time to get money moved out of the LAF, as I recall. I don't know, you have to send a wire or a thing, and then there's some delay, and then the money will move over into the, am I correct about that?
Yes. So we also have to use the intermediary bank, Bank of America. So that also takes some time for the wire between banks.
Yeah, so it actually, unless there's government regulations that require that, that's actually a much slower process than moving money from a money market fund to a bank. The same thing could be done. You can set up a wire
I guess
transfer.
I don't see why not, really simplistic, just eliminate the first step, eliminate the LIF and put that into a money market, right? I mean, and then we can refine how often.
Yeah,
back and forth.
Am
I missing
You're right,
something?
you're right. But I think as you're seeing from our discussion here and the length of time it's taken to get to this point, there's a great deal of hesitancy to do anything too radical. So I would suggest what we do is try to get the new alternative platform on the table, start working for a few months, and then we can start talking about, how much do we reduce the holdings, not just in the LAF, but more importantly in those banks. Those banks are paying nothing, or 1/10 of 1%. And we still have pretty large balances in at least one of them. I think it's Bank of America. We have a large amount. So to continue it, so my suggestion, and George picked up on, is a subcommittee of 2. Is there another member of the committee who would want to join me in this discussion, working out, again, meeting with staff, also with our attorney, who is active now, correct? I mean, she's active and available, and if we wanted to set up a meeting with her to discuss the investment alternatives and how they stack up against investment policy and government code, is she up to speed and prepared for that now, or?
Well, we have not had a chance to talk to her about it. She's been on vacation, but I'm sure she's very familiar and she'd be
Okay.
quite willing to step in.
So is there someone else?
It'll be fun.
I could be a subcommittee of 1, but it's better to get some.
It'd be better to have 2. I hesitate because I have a lot of travel coming up for me. Otherwise I would, but
So that she's good. It's fine.
Oh,
but,
good.
you know, on my
Excellent.
plate.
yep, I understand.
But I will say, I just, capitalists, I still not support. I see what looks like a lot of fear. This is really easy. Like the amount of time we've spent on this discussion is remarkable to me. When I first was asked to join this committee many years ago, I was asked to bring a corporate view to help us think about things. This is beyond easy. Every company does this every day. Really, you're just literally transferring money between one account and another. And you can even set it up. I'm sure B of A has this because we bank accounts with them. I don't know if they have it for the government, but they have it with corporations. You don't even have to transfer it. When you make the transfer, when you make the payment out, it will pull the money out of money. We're literally just leaving money on the table and kind of spinning our wheels here over something that's really simple. We of course should go through the lawyers to make sure it's right, but it didn't matter a year ago because there was no yield. Now there's a lot of yield and we're in a budget deficit. So we need to do this. We shouldn't think about 3 months, 6 months. We should get the meeting with the lawyer, check on it, make a recommendation to the town council, and do this. And it will be really straightforward. And if I didn't have the family health issue, I'd be happy to work with you on it.
I'm perfectly happy to work on my own. I usually do. Not here, but. Okay, so I will,
Subcommittee of one.
and
Does everyone approve of that? Any, any negatives, any opposed?
so just so you know, my next step, I guess presumably through Cindy, I would like to set an appointment, or it could be by phone, to talk to the attorney and kind of give her the broad outlines. And you may want to do that in advance, I don't know, but I'd like to do that within the next week. I'm gonna be out of town. I'm gonna be out of town a week from now. So I'd like to have that preliminary thing taken care of. So in case there's any issues on her plate, I can be researching them or knocking them down before we get too much later into the summer.
But if the extent that the operational, we can do a call, I can jump to it, and I can bring my CFO to the conversation because SVB, the SVB failure, we've gone super deep on treasury management over the last few months, have recommendations.
Jason, into the mic, please.
Oh yeah, just bring it close.
I just offered to have a discussion and help.
Yeah, and I thank you, Bill, for bringing this up. And the reason this is in the agenda ahead of the next item around budget expenses and everything is before we're discussing increasing anyone's taxes. It would be mismanagement of our resources to do, as Jason points out, to miss the obvious that everyone else is taking advantage of, which is $100,000+ for the general fund against a total structural deficit of $800,000 or $900,000. That's 12, 13%. It's a lot, and I don't have to raise anyone's taxes. I don't have to do anything differently. We just continue to spend money, and we have free money effectively coming in. So.
I just want to point out that Cindy's going to be out on vacation next week, but I'm going to do my best. I know Bill can't hear me, to set up an appointment with the attorney and you, and I guess to start with. Okay, what?
I'm sorry. Can you hear? It's
Yeah.
obviously me. I can't do.
Just Cindy's on vacation next week, but Starla will do her best to work with you. Is that right? Yeah.
Okay, okay. That part's easy. Thank you.
You're so soft spoken.
No,
Okay.
there's some. We're still learning how to use these microphones.
Well, yeah,
and
we
there's some
have to close talk them.
There's some distortion.
There's an echo in the room. It's we're all lamenting the days of the finance committee where we met over in the little small conference room over at the town council around a sort of little table. But oh well, technology marches on. I would open this to the public, and I see some members with hands up. We'll start with Betsy.
Hey, thank you, George. And I just want to applaud. Bill Urban went over almost everything that we just went through tonight or this afternoon about 6 weeks ago. And so I can't help but think of the $50,000 that we didn't make in the meantime. So it would be my proposal, first of all, and to say it's one of the most concrete items that I can point to in my 2 years of attending your meetings that has come out of this committee. I really want to see the town respect this at the level that it needs to. The conversation came before the town council at the last council meeting in June. There are a couple people that spoke up about it, so it's not new news. It is free money, and that's so rare. So thank you, Starla, for offering to do your level best to get this going. And I think you'll get a lot of positive feedback from the public. And perhaps the committee would consider scheduling a meeting in the near-term future, because I think this, in parallel with the audit, is something we really want to keep our eye on. Thank you again.
Thank you, Betsy. Rita, I see your hand too.
Okay, well, I would have said exactly what Betsy just said, but Bill, your presentation a couple of months ago was exciting, and I too feel like, oh, we've missed out on about $56,000. And so when we're cutting 25K out of something, or thinking about all of the money that we spent for contractors last year, that starts adding up to a lot of money at the end of the year. What, about $400,000? So I'm very excited. Perhaps Bill, and you'd look into having some of the public work with you or do some research for you. And as Jason said, a lot of individuals are looking into this exact same thing for themselves. Nonprofits, 2 nonprofits that I help are looking into this, and a lot of it was based on Bill's presentation a couple of months ago. So thank you, Bill, for educating us. I really appreciate that. But this is exciting work. But we've lost $56,000, and I totally agree that we don't need to hire somebody, especially since we're hiring 2 people now in the finance department, and I'm sure that they're really great candidates. And it's just, you can put these things automatically in timelines to roll the money that you need. I mean, I'm preaching to the choir here, but well, we don't need to add on a $50,000 expense to do this thing when we've just hired 2 new people in finance. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Rita. At the risk of me sounding cliched, it is true that in this case, time is money, and it's good to be reminded of that. Any other comments here from the committee or members of the public on this item before we move on?
Do you need a resolution or anything? Or no?
Yeah, we've approved our subcommittee of 1 here, and they're by nature informal. So Bill, you'll report back to us, and I'll work with staff on when the next meeting will work. We have meetings in the calendar at a regular interval, but if we need to move it up, we will. Okay, we're moving on to our final item of the evening, and this is on the same theme here of sustainable budgeting. And the idea is for us all to discuss ideas for dealing with what appears to be a structural imbalance that's developed between income and expense. I think, just by way of setting the stage, we've had an extraordinary last couple of years of changes. We had, of course, the dislocations caused by the pandemic, the onset of inflation, but then our own housing element issue with the new RHNA process and having to hire additional consultants and staff and raise expenditures. So a key question for me, perhaps to kick this off on behalf of staff, is how much of that is transient and potentially going to abate? How much is permanent? Of course, we have the sheriff's budget item, and that's a huge hole that is structural, and that's not going to go away. Just comment on the shape of our budget going forward, and how close does it look to coming back into balance in a year's time?
Definitely, yes. Moving forward, there will be additional requirements on the budget for expenditures, specifically with the ongoing sheriff's contract. That one's a little harder to gauge, as the county is proposing to do a year-by-year analysis versus in previous years or historically with the county going into 5-year contracts. So it'll be a little harder to gauge year over year for a sheriff's contract. But if we're looking at the first proposal, that increase was along the lines of about almost $900,000, just sheriff's contract alone. Additionally, we see rising costs in software year over year, as that technology continues to be an additional necessity for ongoing business, as well as the use of consultants for various projects that we have going on. The capital improvement program, there will also be some maintenance that we will need to incorporate for ongoing needed items at the town center, aging buildings, and mechanical systems as well. So this would be an ongoing analysis to review and project forward for these additional costs and what we can anticipate for the coming years.
Okay, so when it comes to, again, thinking about the fact that this year we have $900,000 coming out of reserves, how can we fix that? In other words, are there ways to cut expenses or use fewer consultants or use the software to become more operationally efficient so we don't have as high personnel costs? Do we need to raise revenue? And if so, where could that come from? How can we deal with the fact that right now we're right above our reserve requirement, 60%. Another year, like the year we just had, we'll be below that requirement. So we should probably be thinking about ways to be prepared for what may happen a year from now. Any thoughts from staff so far on that, or do we have a process to begin thinking about that?
We're working on a budget schedule and a budget process, and we don't have it. You know, we tried to get the audit schedule out first, and so, but that's one of the next things on my list. I think that the sheriff's contract is going to be an ongoing concern, and I think there's additional maintenance that's required of the now aging buildings that needs to be taken into consideration, and whatever staffing levels the town wants. So I think, you know, and the structure of the sheriff's contract is changing, right? Previously, it was a longer term contract. The philosophy behind it has changed. And now the philosophy is they want every penny spent is a penny they want paid back, which not unreasonable. I think
And they're proposing to adjust this every year?
every year to recover their total costs.
Okay. Have they shared their cost accounting approach to this? In other words, they have to support unincorporated San Mateo County and the hills right above our head,
Right,
and they have to drive through Portola Valley on their way there.
right.
How much of the cost that they're recovering is actually being used to benefit other folks?
Well, and I think we talked a little bit about this previously, but they have shared their findings. Whether we would agree with their approach to full cost recovery is debatable, I think. But we're not in the strongest negotiation period on this place. I mean, clearly they're the choice for public safety in our community.
Mhm.
So fairness and equity is our best argument. Like, are you taxing this properly? I think Howard is arranging for us to go in and talk to them again in the near future to have some of those heart-to-heart discussions. And we're happy to share the results of that with the Finance Committee and the Council once completed.
Okay, and is it a non-starter, Menlo Park or Atherton or Redwood City? They're not interested in expanding their law enforcement footprint?
Well, I can't speak for them. We haven't talked to them directly. I can tell you that the idea of just the whole concept of contracting out has gone from being very favorable to unfavorable in most communities. I mean, and the chance that Menlo Park or Redwood City is going to be less expensive than the sheriff is, you know, if there's any difference, it's modest. We have economy of scale with the sheriff.
Yeah, but I would only say you have no leverage unless you have no.
That's true.
So the
No
chairman
argument.
of the very first startup I did 30 some years ago, once he liked to speak in aphorisms. And when I was asking him about a point of negotiation, he said, "One is none." And that's always stuck with me on everything. So it doesn't really matter if, you know, Menlo Atherton would be willing to do it for substantially less. Just the fact that you could flip from the plus side of the sheriff's office ledger to the other side of the ledger. In other words, what happens if they have to drive through Portola Valley and they aren't getting any contribution margin from here and their costs of doing everything everywhere else go up? Because then there's a multiplier on that. Right. So if you can't leave, you've got no leverage. That's all I'm saying. So it would be good, in my view, to at least check.
All right, so noted. I think that we don't have time to change that this year, but since they're going to be renewing the contract every year, there will
Right.
be time for it.
Right, so there may be time for somebody else to reduce their costs and not raise taxes on their citizens by saying Menlo Park, right, it abuts to PV anyway, and from a law enforcement standpoint, we're not that intense of a community, fortunately. We need law enforcement, but we don't have a lot of crime here, so maybe we could do a deal. And all you have to do is have somebody willing to discuss doing a deal to change the calculus from how much money am I going to make out of Portola Valley to what happens if I lose the cost contribution from Portola Valley.
I have a question for actually both of you, because we do have in town is it called the Traffic and Safety Committee?
I think something like that.
And I don't really know much about, their day-to-day operations, but they get, I think every time they meet, they get a report from the sheriff's office on, activity that's going on and so forth. So it occurs to me that members of that committee are as well informed as any of the rest of us about what, at least the services that they're reporting on, what they're actually doing. Is there some way we could ask them to participate in the kind of discussions George is talking about, which is, identifying areas where maybe we can push back or ask for a little bit more leniency on the price based on data, data that they have shared with us and that we've evaluated, so that we have a stronger position. Because part of our problem is we don't have alternatives. And the second problem is we don't have knowledge or data, which I don't, to know where the pressure points are, or the opportunities for optimization or something. But I would think some members of that committee would be closer to it than we would be. So if there's some way to encourage them or ask them to engage in this discussion. I don't think there's any more important item on our budget in terms of cost control than this. I mean, that is driving the structural deficit that we're anticipating. So it's as high a priority as anything else. And it's all about the service level, right? I mean, we just count numbers on this committee, but the service level is what we really care about. I don't know, by the way, if they go into things like burglary and all the other services, I don't know if that's part of what that committee looks at, but I believe they're better situated to evaluate and help us manage this contract than any other committee problem.
Well, thank you. I can chime in on that. So the BBTS committee, which is a traffic committee, Bicycle Pedestrian Traffic Safety Committee, they've been aware of the sheriff contract too. In fact, we did have after our last finance committee meeting, there was a Q&A session with the sheriff that was set up for the public to attend. And their chair, Ed Holland, and another committee member, Kevin Welch, also attended too. And I can tell you, I'm the staff liaison to that committee. And if anything, we have basic service now. A lot of the stuff they're concentrating on is also kind of more services, more traffic citations. Can you patrol these areas even more? So I think I can mention it to the chair too, but I could also recommend if George can, a lot of the times if you as a chair can reach out to Ed Holland as a chair, just a basic email saying, hey, can we collaborate a little bit more and share information? And I can verify that the sheriff does present at the BPTS committee meetings their citations and accident list for the previous month. And so that information actually is also online. If you go to their section of the website and in their minutes, all that information is there. But I hear what you're saying. There could, if there's information that's needed from them and collaboration, I would suggest George email Ed and he'll provide you what information he has in his experience at the Q&As so far. I hope that answered the question.
Yeah, it's helpful. I will check in with Ed and see if we can't collaborate more closely on this, because I agree with the sentiment that's been expressed here by Bill and others. The sheriff's budget and their change in their accounting is our biggest issue. Again, if you look at, when the Almanac wrote an unflattering report on our then $1.6 million deficit and what have you, it struck me that Woodside and us are the only ones who are contracting with the sheriff's department rather than having our own force, and the other towns that have done relatively better, they haven't had their costs go up dramatically of law enforcement in 1 year because of this changed approach to cost accounting. And given this isn't just inflation, this is a change in how the sheriff's department is doing business. That's one of the key reasons why I'm trying to find alternatives, because there has to be a way to discipline people from that kind of thing, because cost accounting, you can come up with any number you want based on what standard of cost accounting you use.
Yeah, I have one prejudice on this, which members of the committee have heard before. I would be in favor of more or same level of traffic stops with warnings and less time actually writing citations. We know unless they've changed the accounting dramatically, this town gets virtually nothing from the money that it comes out of fines. It all goes somewhere else, but we're paying for the time of those officers when they're out there writing those tickets. And, you know, there's an example right there, George. We are paying for them generating revenue for other people, not for us. Now, we want the safety. You can accomplish that by doing plenty of pullovers, but I don't mind if the committee is known as very aggressive about enforcing traffic laws and giving people warnings and then hammer them if they, you know, do it again. But I don't need to be writing a bunch of one-off citations, because I presume it takes quite a bit more time than to give a warning. I don't know how long it takes, but I haven't been stopped recently, but it's got to be at least another 10 or 15 minutes to do a full-blown citation than to just pull someone over and say, you know, you missed that stop sign, you have a rolling stop, you need to watch it. We're going to be very aggressive on patrolling that. It's a difference between, you know, doing the paperwork side where we're probably killing a lot of time. We're not getting any benefit out of increased safety during that time. That'd be a push point.
That's a good comment. Yes, Judith.
These are great ideas, and I urge you to collect them, follow up on them. But at the end of the day, and if you have no alternative, we are where we are.
Right.
In fact, the contract, they're available. The current contract and the proposed contract are available. And what the sheriff is proposing is to make the new contract even less granular, more opaque. They don't want to actually commit to do anything. And I've asked them to at least say, you're going to provide us the level of service that you are currently providing. And they've just said they'll take that under advisement. And what they're doing is saying, we're just standardizing the contract, which means we're going to do stuff for this amount of money. And the idea of getting so granular that you wouldn't be able to charge us for, you know, pulling people over is, I don't think you're going to get there, although I want every idea on the table that we can possibly put on the table to get some bearing. The other thing is they said they had entered into a 5-year contract with us, and they just don't do that with any other jurisdiction. So in a way, what they're saying is you had too good a deal. And so that's kind of the mindset, just for background more than anything for all of you.
Okay. That's helpful.
George, I just wanted to add, you know, there in our discussions with the county sheriff, they're looking at all their contract agencies. It's not just here in Woodside. You know, there's a number that they serve. So they are trying to go. They did a study, a cost analysis, and they're just trying to go for full cost recoup and not lose money. But once again, it's just not the two agencies, it's all their agencies that they're contracted with.
Do we understand the impetus for that? In other words, are they trying to improve officer compensation or retain or recruit more officers, or what's driving this need to extract more money from the various contracts? What one assumes they had a balanced budget before, right? Based on inflows, based on contracts and property taxes and the county budget and everything else.
From what I understand, the impetus is they did a study to determine how much the services were really costing and finding out that they were losing money. That's what.
Yeah, but again, they had a balanced budget, so they weren't losing money, quote unquote. And I can, based on the cost accounting standard I have, I can tell you Like, what standard are you using? I could be adding more cash to my bank account every month and prove to you that I'm losing money, right? From an accounting standpoint.
So there was a true up for the 5-year. They were saying that some of the cost of living and the union agreements didn't come due after that. So there's a lot of that. They did mention that they had a hard time recruiting people for San Mateo County because the cost of living here is very high. There is some contract items that provide them with a certain amount of pay compared to other jurisdictions in the region also.
Okay, yeah, just trying to understand, because again, if you run an agency on fixed cost, it's either shuffling money around where we pay more so someone else is paying less, or they want to increase the overall budget because they're trying to add officers or retain officers because it costs too much to live here. And I'm just trying to understand that.
Thank you.
So as Starla pointed out a couple meetings ago, any tax increases cannot be voted on till November of 24. And anything impacting property taxes, which is on I believe a June 30 fiscal year, right? So nothing can happen in the fiscal year ending 24.
Right.
The first time we could do anything property tax wise is fiscal year starting July 1, 24, ending. So in the meantime, we would have this $800,000 deficit this fiscal year and then next fiscal year.
Correct.
I mean,
Well,
are we worried about fiscal year 20? Well, we're in fiscal year 24 now. So in both fiscal year 24 and 25.
Yes.
Aren't we worried about that?
yes. But that's why we're trying to put together some workshops, and we will be actively looking for other potential budget reductions or other fixes.
Well, it's going to be hard to cut $800,000.
Oh, yes.
I mean, capital. You count capital expenditures in that deficit or no?
Yes.
Oh, okay. So I guess the famous deferral.
Yeah, well, yeah, but and hopefully, I guess the strategy I think would be helpful, but you can tell me what you think, is to have either general sessions or to familiarize residents with the budget and what the impact of reducing or not having additional revenue will be. Does that make sense? No? We'll just familiarize them with the budget and what the budget issues are.
What are the additional revenue options? I can list what parcel tax is one. UUT, I guess, is another. Is sales tax something we have any local control over, or is that not?
We do, but there's a cap of 10%, and I think we're like just slightly more than 0.5% away from that. So I would say if you're going to go to the ballot, that would not be my suggestion.
Yeah, but those are the levers that I'm aware of. I'm just trying to get a list of them. And any others I'm missing?
Yeah,
I believe other cities have looked at a real estate transaction tax.
so document, gosh, now I can't think of it. Transfer tax, documentary transfer tax, right? You, if you're a general law city like we are, you can't change it. If you are a charter city, you can change it. Right.
Like Los Angeles implemented that. They're
The charter city. So Palo Alto, Mountain View, Redwood City are all charter cities. That means they have their own charter, and their charter sets out what they can and cannot do. We go by the general law, California State Code. But just, I think it's a long, hard effort to transition from a general law city to a charter city. Does that make sense?
You're suggesting we could do that?
You can do it, but I would say it will be very expensive and it will take 3 to 5 years.
That won't help us.
Longer than the property.
Right,
tax.
right. I would say it's a red herring compared to the real problem at hand.
Okay.
It would be a great solution if we could do it. I would agree with that. So the other thing that we can do, and I think you've heard these, and it's in the graph that you've got, is a user fee study to try and make sure that the general taxpayer is not subsidizing specific services like planning or building inspections, planning permits, et cetera.
Okay.
I don't see the franchise fees that the town collects from the primarily utility providers. Are those not subject to local jurisdiction in terms of setting them?
Right, UUT is, franchise fees are not.
Who sets the franchise fees? Is that state?
Mhm. Yes.
I'd like to address a different approach.
Okay.
On the revenue side, our largest revenues are property tax, our share of property tax. When I was on the San Mateo County grand jury, I wrote a report about why it is that Portola Valley, Woodside City failed to get all the property tax they would do. And so it led me to conclude that it's a very complex issue calculating how much property tax, of all the property taxes that are collected from residents of Portola Valley, what percentage of that should come back to us? And it isn't clear to me that the county is very effective at that. And so one possibility, and this is a shot in the dark because I don't have any evidence that it's incorrect, but if we could hire someone who is knowledgeable in this area to investigate whether or not we're getting paid the correct amount, it might be worth, we may be wasting money, but it also may pay back immensely.
And just to build on what Ken just said, one specific thing which just occurs to me is that every San Mateo County property owner pays tax to the county, and some of that goes to fund the sheriff's office. Okay, if I'm paying separately for a sheriff's contract for them to do in Portola Valley what they're doing elsewhere based on people paying their property tax, I should get a rebate on my property tax.
Actually, George, that was brought up on one of our meetings, and I thought that seemed very reasonable at the time. But thinking about it, not everybody in the county gets property tax back, and we get property tax back because we're a town,
That's right.
and that mitigates exactly what
Yeah.
the argument you're making.
But I'm only saying, again, this might be, if we did have an argument in that area, this could function on the negotiating equivalent of Menlo Park talking to us about engaging in police services. Because if I say to these guys, you're double counting, and I could go to court and have you pay half back to me of what I'm paying to you, why don't we skip that? And why don't you just agree to charge me a quarter less? Right, because I suspect that a case could be made that we're paying twice for certain sheriff services.
So on my point about our share of property taxes that come back to us, the first person that we might want to talk to is Jim Sacco, since they have a handle on all the educational issues that have roiled the property tax amounts that we get back.
Well, I think that's a great idea. But I think we can also reach out. There was a firm that used to do that kind of audit for cities at the county level. So let me try and make a couple of phone calls and just see what the scope of that would be and what the cost would be.
What portion are we supposed
This is why I hate initiatives. It goes back to Prop 13, and it's like property by property. And so there's not a standard, there is just the mix of it. Most communities get 10 or 11 or 12% on average. But remember, if you sell your property today, then the guy, well, or if you buy the property today, the guy who lives next door may have lived there 30 years. So there's a vast difference in what you're paying.
Well, another item of consideration, it's not on this list, is to, which I assume would have to go to the council, maybe the electorate, but would be for us to reduce the friction required to build here. And either by, I'm not necessarily suggesting we relax the building standards, but maybe increasing the velocity of permit approval, or by reducing or increasing the hours that people are allowed to work. I used to live in Ladera, and you're allowed to work on Saturdays there. In Portola Valley, you're not. I didn't find it particularly disruptive that people were working on Saturdays. If you did that, you'd add literally 20% additional work time for houses being developed. We bring more houses online, we bring in more revenue because we bring up the new development. And if we actually figured out how to lower the friction, there's an awful lot of houses here that want to be developed that would come through Prop 13 and get to a new tax basis. So again, I just put it on the
Back to Bill's suggestion. I know when it was discovered, we should have been getting money back from the county, I don't know, 10 years ago or so. And I know Ed Davis, long since departed, I believe negotiated with the county as to how much should be coming back. But so a lot of time has passed. And so having some kind of, and I don't know what the basis of that computation was. All we heard about it was Ed Davis was negotiating with the county, and rather than keep it going for years, he settled. That's all I remember. But time has passed, and given the sheriff's contract and everything, maybe there's legitimate ground for.
We could tell them we changed our methodology for calculating how we get
Well,
full
it's
revenue
been-
recovery.
It's been and how much are we getting under that agreement from the county? Back? It was a fixed amount, like I think we were getting nothing, and we hadn't gotten it for X years, a long time. And then, so they owed us the X years we hadn't been getting it. And then
Yep.
Ed negotiated the new rate, which I believe is the rate in effect. So I think it's a fixed percentage of I guess what we pay them. I don't recall exactly. And then I don't know on top of that if we get increases over. I don't know what the formula is.
One thing to check is whether they've been whittling down the percentage. I'm a very suspicious person because I think it was substantially more than 10 years ago, probably maybe more like 15 or 20 when that happened. But if we reached an agreement that they'd been underpaying us and then they had this catch-up period and they'd agreed to a percentage, if they've reset us to what they pay everybody else, but there was a rationale in the agreement to pay us more because of some of these technical issues that Ed worked out back then, it would be good to revisit that. That would be a very good point of leverage because they may be a substantial amount they owe us again.
I think listening to you, I wrote this report 17 years ago. Ed Davis had nothing to do with this at all.
Oh, okay.
There was a state law that the only county in California that is impacted that did not implement it was Seneca. And yet all the towns, including Portola Valley, knew they were supposed to get more. And so they're also responsible for not adding more. And then the state comes in and audits this calculation. They had a standard to make sure that they were implementing the effects of this new law that was passed. The law was passed because low tax cities, such as Portola Valley, which had less than 7% of their money coming back to them, because they didn't have things like public safety officers, we're going to get more money. Okay, the county didn't refuse. The county claims they just ignored it. They claim that there was nothing at a very unpleasant experience with someone who said, "Are you using us or taking money?" But Ed had nothing to do with this. And
Negotiate it to the town.
well, he may negotiate because they owed us money, and then the question was how much money do they owe? Because once it's been audited, there's no going back. So years way back didn't count because they've been audited by the state, even though the state agreed that they failed in their audit.
Well, we have a benefit there.
Well, we're also.
We have several years that haven't been audited. yet.
Right.
We're in great shape. Sorry.
So it's not a simple calculation for you guys think. Or 7.3 or something. It's very complex, I know.
Right.
So it's well hidden if someone in the county has a belief that other cities in the southern part of the county can afford this, therefore don't worry too much about it. That's what we're probably fighting, if we're fighting anything. I'm not
Okay.
saying that-
Okay.
I think it's worth making sure that we can identify that seems out.
Right, agreed. And I think this is some legislation that occurred for low property tax cities or, anyway, I think I've got enough to look into it a little bit, so I will do that.
Great. And I just want to echo what Ken said, having remembered living through all of that it just makes sense to do due diligence. I don't want to start conspiracy theories or anything like this. Probably the odds are everything's okay and totally on the up and up, but it's very good to look into it. It's just solid due diligence, make sure that somebody didn't forget and do things in a different way. And the cause for us having to pay so much attention is that we have a material problem now caused by them changing how things work on the other end of the ledger or where we're paying them. Any other discussion of ideas from committee members before I get to the public? All right, we will open this up. We'll start with Karen. We haven't heard from you yet today, Karen.
Hi, thank you. I just wanted to, this is Karen Batra. I wanted to give you some historical context about the sheriff contract, and I don't think this has been mentioned before, and offer some suggestions to look into. Back in, I don't remember how long ago, it was about 8 years ago, a resident was robbed in his home, and the family was put into their bedroom. And I worked with several members of the public to try to address the situation. And at that time, we shared the sheriff with Woodside. So we have actually increased our sheriff patrol significantly at that time. So back then, it was a little bit more amorphous if somebody was in town. They could have been at Woodside, they could have been in San Carlos and other locations. So now we have a dedicated person here 24/7. So share between two people. And so that's really the significant cost increase. I'm not suggesting necessarily that we decrease the patrols, but perhaps we can go back and work with Woodside or even Ladera, and maybe share an officer with Ladera and somehow have some sort of relationship that way, because I don't think you're going to find cutting costs and worrying about whether somebody's cited or just given a warning. I think it's just physically having somebody here 24/7, 365 is the main cost. And maybe we could share, somehow share it with a really, really close community, not San Carlos, but maybe Ladera, or I don't know how Ladera, the county works. So that could be complicated, but maybe something with Woodside. That's just an idea. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Good suggestion. I will mention I'm somewhat skeptical about the 24/7/365 claim, since I know of at least one anecdote where our 24/7/365 sheriff was actually off in La Honda and took 20 or 30 minutes to respond to an accident or some sort of incident here in town. And so I wonder how frequently that happens, and hence my earlier comment about whether we're actually just subsidizing coastside services in some way, shape, or form, at least at the margin. And given the lack of granularity, it's not like the sheriff is offering geographical information on squad car locations here to bolster their claim of service. And they're not even, according to Councilmember Haskell, not even guaranteeing any particular level of service now in the future. So I bet that includes no guarantee of 24/7/365. So
I'm pretty sure they have records. I think the Traffic and Safety Committee can get them and has looked at them on response time for every incident that happens in the town. I know they were
That would be
keeping them
good.
4 or 5 years ago because I went to one of their meetings and they were presenting that.
okay, good.
That would be tremendous.
I can ask Ed about that.
That may not help the case, but at least you'd know what the reality is.
Yeah, that's right.
Because the reality is you want fast response time, even if they're just over the border, correct?
Well, or we shouldn't be paying for fast response time if we're not getting it, which I think is actually what's happening. I know that's what you're saying.
Yeah, I just think the comment's been made. We may be being viewed as a way to subsidize other pressures on their budget.
In fairness, there's another comment I remember the sheriff's office made when I went to that meeting. Back then, at least, one of their problem for us too, is they would spend quite a bit of time going for false alarms on house alarms. And, they'd show up and there was nothing going on and, someone's alarm had gone off or whatever. And there were a lot of them. And they said it was actually a major drain on their time and effort and so forth, which back at that time, my question was, are they going to start charging for false alarms? Now, I have a house in Southern California and they actually do that down there. You're probably familiar with other communities where they've instituted that. That's kind of a hard decision to make. You don't want to, it can get to be a problem to implement, but we probably have a community where that happens quite a bit still, I'm guessing. And I don't think it's unfair to ask, at least consider if that still happens, for those people to pay a little bit larger contribution, collected in some fashion, either to the city or the sheriff's department to help offset that cost, because it also degrades response time for everything else that might be going on. It's not just the money, the time you're spending, so you can't do somewhere else either.
It's definitely worth considering. Is this something that we recommend to you as we're talking to traffic and safety, or that we recommend back to council?
In terms of
Thinking about, with regard to the overall police negotiation, thinking about allowing them or suggesting that they charge for false alarm. I had the same thing. I owned a house in Pacifica and they charged $100. The first time was free. The second time you had a false alarm, they charged you $100. The third time, I think it was $250. And I was talking to the sheriff because my wife set off the alarm and they were there and I paid the check, or the check, or they said it was in the mail, but whatever. He said that it had dramatically decreased their operational load. It really worked. Obvious economic incentives. That's a way that we could potentially partner with the sheriffs in a win-win to them to say, hey, we're trying to help you decrease the workload, but we want to maintain good quality service. I brought this up last time. I feel like we need a lot more, given the magnitude of this cost and now the variability that they want to renegotiate every year. It feels like somehow we need to recommend to council or staff that a lot more emphasis be put on this.
Yeah, I don't think this requires any kind of motion or anything. I think we're communicating with staff and with our town council liaison right here in the meeting with members of the public who are listening. I will reach out, as already previously discussed, to Ed on the Traffic and Safety Committee to try to coordinate on how they're thinking about all of this as well, since I imagine that's a related thing, and try to get more of this data. Like, do we have any sense on response times? Do we have any sense on false alarms? Has the sheriff's office shared the number of false alarms they have to deal with? Might be good to ask. In other words, would that be a way to lower the workload? I bet they wouldn't suggest lowering their price, but I mean, that would possibly be helpful. Okay. And for those online, Howard said
The other thing that occurs to me, I don't know how to measure this precisely. We've had a lot and probably continue to have a lot of public safety outages, either planned or unplanned. I don't know. They've multiplied greatly in the last 3 to 4 years. Some
Sure.
it's, fire hazard and winds and other things. My guess is that always draws in a lot more calls or issues with false alarm, or things going, just stuff going off, electrical or whatever, that probably involves the sheriff's office. So the bottom line here, are we in effect paying the sheriff's office to respond to issues that fallout of PG&E's actions, whether planned or unplanned. We shouldn't, I mean, we shouldn't have to pay sheriff's time for things that are caused by their actions, whether they're for the right reasons or not. If it's the problems with their equipment, I'm sure the sheriff's department knows precisely how many calls are getting related to those types of incidents. I'm sure they spike during outages. There's more emergency calls, right? Because people don't have air conditioning or whatever the hell it is, but there are impacts from that someone's measuring.
Yeah.
And we're paying for it and not, but it's not providing. It's caused by another entity, another utility.
Right.
We're done with the lead.
Okay.
All right.
Okay. Thanks, Ken. We will move on to Caroline.
Great, thank you very much. All these good ideas. I'm a new member of the PPTS, and I really would appreciate if Mr. Savage can contact our committee. 2 members have already tried to make some changes because we don't see any progress. Just to contract with the sheriff itself is, we definitely need due diligence there because like you said, we don't know the specifics and it is not, we should not be responsible because they made a mistake in their cost analysis or their management. So I hope you will recommend that we continue the negotiations and start the workshops, not just for that particular issue, the sheriff's contract, but our finances of the town. As you know, we all are committed to this town. We love this town, but I believe there was some mismanagement somewhere, and luckily we're on the right track, and with due diligence and working together, that all committee members, that more public comes to the table and discusses this. And like you did today, that was great. And a lot of ideas came up, and I hope we can continue that. And I hope you will talk to Ed Holland. Thank you.
Okay, will do. Thank you, Caroline. And Rita.
Oh, thank you. Palo Alto charges a license fee every year for if you have an alarm that you have to put a sticker in your window, and then they don't charge you for the first time it goes off, but they charge you for the second time it goes off and the police come. So, that license, everyone that has an alarm would have to get a license. And for that, the bicycle meeting, I've gone many times, and many times the sheriff's department had not shown up and had not given a report. So, the public would then be questioning, it's like, hey, we're paying you and you're not here. Perhaps there was an emergency somewhere, and that was the reason why they didn't show up to that meeting, but they were not at that meeting. And then the way to save money or to make money is by not spending the money. And I've asked a few times in different meetings about if there's a true cost analysis for different events. And yes, we have some really great events in town. And yes, people give donations to those events. But are the true costs of overtime from the sheriff's department or overtime of staff or even comp time? There's been a few times that, some exempt staff has been giving comp time or extra money for their retirement for some comp time. And that was in the warrant list or written up. And so, are there true analysis for an event, extra of Howard's guys cleaning up or putting things together, and overtime for the sheriff and overtime for the staff. And one of the things I've talked to Howard about before is the contractor tier process. When we bring contractors on, and yes, everyone's heard me talk about a code associated what project they're working on, but I worked for a company and put together, if a manager needed a contractor, there were 3 different type of things associated with a budget. Did they need that contractor for getting a project done because it really just needs to get done and there's not enough hands to get that project done? Do they need that because they're not finding somebody to hire with that particular talent? So they want to bring that person in because they just can't hire, and maybe that person is going to be converted in the future to a full-time hire. Or do they need that person for a particular task that we don't want to hire, like what we do with the lobby? I'm not sure if we still have the lobbyists, but we pay them a particular amount of money. And so by setting it up like that, asking those questions and tying it to a budget, when that amount of hours is done, it goes back to, hey, do we still need that contractor? Do we need to convert that person? Have we done enough hours that we get a discount in our contract if we convert that person at this time, or do we need to wait 6 more months? So let's budget another 6 more months. But by thinking about these things ahead, you're not wasting money out the door, and it's saving money. And I don't feel it was done with all the contracting hours that were done in the past 2 years with the housing element, with the safety element. They weren't necessarily coded. I mean, I'm just speaking from the cheap seats because I can't really find the stuff on open.gov, and in some of the questions, the information wasn't on open.gov. So I don't have privy to all of the information, but from what I can see and the answers that I've received, these items weren't coded by project, and that would be a great help for us to be able to budget and plan for the future, and also look at the true cost of the housing element, the safety element, the ISMMD, and so many other projects. And I would gladly be on some subcommittee to work on this particular one, especially with the contractors. Thank you for listening. I appreciate all the hard work moving forward.
Okay, thanks, Rita. Good suggestions. I summed that up in my mind, my simple brain, as your comment about money we don't spend, we don't have to raise somewhere else. And that's obviously true. And always looking for efficiency and ways to spend the public's money more effectively is job number 1, rather than just finding additional ways to get money out of them. And that's our number 1 approach. But we, of course, have to have balanced budgets too. So we're going to keep working on this one. Any other comments? Oh, wait, there's Betsy. Your hand is up again, I think.
Yeah, thank you so
Okay,
much for the opportunity to weigh in briefly about the sheriff contract. It is a lot of no fun negotiating with a single seller, something that we need as much as we do sheriffs. And I just want to follow, therefore, on Karen's suggestion of seeing whether we can align with Woodside. I was in discussion with someone and understand that they're in the middle of a 2-year contract. So I see a real opportunity. It's twice as many, we'd be twice as robust as we are alone with a single community that's approximately our size. A much larger, more arduous alignment would be if we could take some collective action with whether it be CCAG or ABAG, but there's a big regional optimization opportunity here. And that is a large portion of our contract is tied up in the structural overtime that we're being assessed. It certainly stands out. And as I read in the Chronicle not 2 months ago, San Francisco is having a whale of a problem with exactly that. So I imagine that we'd be the tail wagging the dog, but if we could collaborate with other larger entities to look at the billing, the structural billing of overtime as it's hitting our fees, that there'd be a lot of leverage there. So thank you for all you're doing. These are ideas. It's easy to give them. It's hard to implement them. So my respect, and if the public can help you in any way, we will.
Thank you. Just a question. Are we aware, is the overtime charges related to the force being under strength and trying to recruit?
I'd have to go back to my notes, but Judith might remember. What they do is they take vacation time.
Oh.
And they take vacation time and sick time,
Mhm.
and they bill it in at overtime. So what we're paying for, we're paying on the front end for a sizable chunk. And it's the way I just described it, it sounds as though it might be 6 weeks, but it appears on the budget to be much greater than that.
Okay, interesting. I wonder if, no doubt, retirement costs are factored in at a higher rate now too. Yeah. Okay. Thank you for that, Betsy. It's really
Welcome.
good info. Anyone else in the public? And any more discussion on these items today?
Yeah, just one thing y'all need to remember, difficult as this problem, the structural deficit problem is, we have a very large reserve. I mean, 60% is still a pretty large reserve. A lot of towns don't have anything close to that. The reason we have that reserve is for things like this, other emergencies. I have no problem on a short-term basis using, some of our reserves to cover these types of costs, because that's the purpose of a reserve. If we had multiple emergencies in a given year, if we had another El Nino, et cetera, there are other sources of funding that could be available to us beyond our reserves. There could be FEMA money there. I remember after El Nino, there was all kinds of federal money, some of it, which is, there's no interest, it was interest-free, some of it was not, but we had other sources available to us to cover the types of, earthquake or flood or fire emergencies we might have. At least it was just localized, and we were the victims of a fire, and it wasn't, the entire state burning up. So, I'm not, this is a problem we have to solve. We have to work on it, but it's not, we're not in an emergency condition when we do deficit spending for a year or two, when we have a reserve as large as it is, even if we go below the 60% target. That's exactly what exists. If you have a reserve that you never go below, that probably tells you reserve is too big. And we know carrying a lot of cash is very expensive, as we talked about several times there now. So that's more like, a little bit of upside to this whole discussion.
No, that's very helpful context, right? We aren't cash strapped acutely. We just need to reverse the trend, and the reserves are there to buffer it if it does take us a year more to get revenue in line and figure out exactly how we're going to work with the sheriff going forward and make certain that revenue and expenses line up. Okay, but I think this has been a very informative conversation. We appropriately focused on the public safety budget, which is the key driver of our problem right now. Kudos, I think, to staff and town council for making this half as big a problem as it was only a couple months ago, which is really cool. And with that, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So when can we expect the next meeting?
I think it's scheduled in a couple months' time. I think September.
Yeah, but there's no audit. So would it be more when Bill, subcommittee?
Are you suggesting that I won't be at the next finance committee?
No, I'm
meeting?
just trying to get a sense of.
You're right. I may not, because wasn't your, George, wasn't your straw man schedule was every 2 months?
Yes, that's right. And so I was thinking that might be the next, or we could move it up if there's reason to do so, such as considering cash management or something else.
Yeah, I know I'm going to be out, that
Yeah,
Yeah,
August
that's
is
the
kind of
only
tough. I think I tried to set the schedule so we wouldn't.
it's not
be
for a football game, so.
August, yeah. I believe we're on a 2-month schedule.
So you think that's when we should meet again?
But I would be guided by staff as well, if there's an urgency to.
Let me understand the new rules. A committee member can call, if they're not in town, they can call into a meeting, but they're not counted as being present for votes and action, but they can participate in a meeting just like any member of the public can. Isn't that correct? They just can't act as a committee member. Is that right?
I don't know for sure. I've heard that, but I can't speak authoritatively on that.
I think there's a nuance to that. I think if the agenda contains the address from which the member is participating, remotely, you can participate in the meeting as a committee member. And it's posted, publicly posted.
So anyone can show up at your house,
Anyone want to show up at your hotel room?
yeah,
they could do
in a
so.
hotel room or house. Yeah, so that's the Brown Act. I'm sorry.
Brown Act, right?
Yeah.
Alternatively, you can participate as a member of the public.
So what I would again propose is that we have our schedule of every 2 months. We can adjust that based on input from staff and necessity, right? So we'll be guided by you. Otherwise, we go with the schedule as it exists. Motion to adjourn?
I move that we adjourn.
Second? Anyone opposed? Okay, we are adjourned at 5:23. Great. Thank you, everyone. This has been very helpful.